Welcome to Season 2 of the Simply Dynamic podcast. I'm Jennifer Maiden, co-creator and executive producer of this podcast, and the Assistant Dean of Graduate Studies at Rowan University's Rohr College of Business. Today, I invite you to join our hosts, Joe Devine and Christina Renna, for a discussion with Kelly Viseltear, Vice President of Production Management and Budgets at NFL Films. Kelly's team handles the budgeting as well as actualizing and workflow logistics for film, TV, and media projects of all scopes and sizes for the National Football League and other sports entities.
Well, hello, Christina. It's great to be with you again.
Always a pleasure, Joe Devine.
You know what we call this podcast, right?
Simply Dynamic.
And do you know why we call it the Simply Dynamic podcast?
Because we have Simply Dynamic guests.
Kelly Viseltear, thank you for joining us today. Kelly is the Vice President of Production Management and Budgets for NFL Films. But more importantly, she's a member of the WGLS Hall of Fame right here at Rowan University. We're recording this today. Kelly's a graduate Hall of Fame member in this great program, and we're honored to have her here. And let me start by simply asking this question, Kelly. I guess there's a lot of people that envy your type of job, but we want to know, how did you get there? How did you get to this job where you are in NFL Films? Because especially a lot of people would do anything to work somehow with the NFL, correct?
Oh,
so
absolutely.
Tell us your story, Kelly.
Okay, so I actually fell into a part-time job at NFL Films via Ned Eckhart, former professor here at Rowan. Yeah. My old boss, Rick Angeli, also an alumni, had called Ned for a recommendation for somebody to work in the sales department there. So the sales department at NFL Films in that day, back in the late 90s, was to sell the facility, right? So we were basically doing anything but football. Corporate videos, we were doing commercials for, Super Fresh or whatever. It was sort of like an array of different projects that had nothing to do with football. So that's how I landed the job. I worked in that department for just a couple of years, and then I moved on to the scheduling department. So the scheduling department, post-production scheduling, handled all of the schedules for all of the shows and projects that we had going through the building just to get them into the rooms. Edit and color grading, at the time was actually called telecine, audio, graphics, that and the like, right? So we scheduled the people and the machines and got that through the system to get everything out the door, on time and to the client specs. Then not long after that, a couple of years in that role, I moved over to project management, which is actually the department I run today, even though my title doesn't really reflect that. It's a little bit wonky. So I moved over to project management in 2003 when the NFL Network started. When the NFL Network launched, we needed to produce a lot of extra shows, right? So now we're running a 24-hour network that didn't have quite a base yet of a library. So we had to provide our library to them and produce new shows for them. So in project management, we moved there to handle all of the budgets and schedules for everything. A lot of NFL Network things, but other clients as well, the league or ESPN or ABC and what have you. And then I've sort of stayed there ever since. And I've just grown into bigger and bigger roles. And now I run the department. I think I started running the department back in 2017. My former boss had retired at that point, and I stepped in and took over.
And how many people do you manage in that role?
There's about 12 total. That includes some part-timers and seasonals and interns, but we do have a nice full-time staff of about 8 of them are full-time staff.
So I feel like you're one of those unique stories where you started your career, you kind of just stayed. You don't see that as much anymore, especially with the younger generations. They hop jobs a lot, but that's definitely not your story. And for those listening, a lot of people may not know that NFL Films is right here in South Jersey. Sometimes people, they know NFL Films, but right being in Mount Laurel, in Burlington County, to have such an institution in South Jersey, it's another one of our little hidden gems for sure.
Who owns NFL Films now?
The National Football League.
I thought
actually.
so. They do, right? Yeah, I thought so.
Yeah, so it's run by a National Football League. Ed and Steve Sable started the company many, many years ago. And Ed was basically filming his son, Steve, play college football and, banked enough footage to show that he can really do this craft and make this amazing art film based on, art of football, is the sport. but it turned into art. And he commissioned, he asked the NFL to commission some of his games shooting some of the championships. And they ended up liking his product so much that they folded him into the NFL. And they sort of bought his company. And,
it's a beautiful facility.
Oh, it's fantastic.
Christina, do you know who the first voice of the NFL was, of NFL Films?
I don't.
Kelly, you obviously know, right? Yeah. John Facenda.
Oh, really?
Yes, John Facenda was the first voice, who also was a South Jersey guy.
Yes.
And so it's pretty interesting that he was the voice of the NFL for many years of NFL Films.
He was. He still is. We still have, we'll use some of his work in our, archival shows. And it's lovely to hear that voice just resonate and cut through.
Yeah.
The facility itself is really fascinating as well. I've been lucky to be in it a few times, and it's been years, but, a full orchestra can fit in a room to record, musical pieces for the films. And then you go into another section of the building and they're doing sounds for Madden, right, for the video games. And it's just completely fascinating. And again, like I said, a hidden gem here in South Jersey that a lot of people, to Joe's point, would be very envious to have a job at a place like that. So talk to us a little bit about working there. I mean, what do you find to be most interesting about being a part of the NFL Films family and the role you play specifically?
Sure. So I would say that the reason I go to work every day, the reason why I love my job and will never leave, take me out with my hands gripping the table, is because of the people. Yeah. The people there are amazing. Like, I've been there now for 26 years and I'm still a baby, right? The people don't leave NFL Films because of the product we produce and the family that has just grown up in those hallways. And it's interesting you say that about, people don't generally stay very much anymore, especially with the newer generations, right? Like, that's sort of the norm to move on a year and a half in. We're finding now that this Generation Z that's just starting to enter the workforce and Gen X, or Gen, what is it? The one before that. Whatever.
I get confused with my Gen X.
I know.
They're staying. And they're staying for a reason, right? Like, I jump back to, we are the only script-to-screen sort of production facility like this on the East Coast. We're like a Hollywood studio on the East Coast. So for students to graduate from a place like Rowan, from their RTF program here and from the School of Communications, to have a job that fits this film industry and media industry that's right here in our backyard is super rare. So that's really appealing for a lot of students and potential, employees that would like to stay there. So I have not left because I just love the work. I love that it changes every day. We have, our new projects where we now just launched Hard Knocks for the off season, right?
Mm-hmm.
So that's pretty cool. Like, it's just new things are always rolling.
Are you allowed to tell us who it is this year?
Actually, no.
So close.
I was trying to trick her into it.
I was just thinking, I was like, did that PR release go out?
No. Good answer. Good answer.
We're so close.
Well, you go back to an important point. I stayed at the same place for 35 years. It was like my family, right? Mm-hmm. And you stay there is because of the people, and the people you work for, the people you work with, and the opportunity to make a difference. And that's what you're really enjoying, which is obviously important. You talked about how many people work for you. How many people work in the NFL film industry for itself?
So NFL Films proper, there are only about 200 to 220 full-time staff people. And then we make up, within the building, the daily grind, if you will. We have a host of seasonal, not just being football seasonals meaning temporary staff, right? Every 6 months or so, we have seasonals, part-time, and contractors that probably make up double that, right? So now we have another probably closer to 500 employees in that building throughout the year, give or take, going through. Then that doesn't include all of the crew we have in all of our football cities shooting the games and filming the games. We've got at least a minimum of 3 cameras at every single game. And then if we're doing a special show, like an in-season, follow doc or something like that, like receiver, we just followed a bunch of receivers that is going to air on Netflix. That is a host of other cameras, audio, equipment managers, production coordinators. It's a team, it's an army, of people. Mm-hmm.
It's all just so fascinating. And there's these technological advances that I feel like have got to impact the day-to-day at NFL Films and how you're consistently doing your job. And not only that, but we're in a lifestyle now where everything is 24/7, right? And so you're talking about new ideas. Okay, how do we take Hard Knock and make it something that we can do, in a different way, in a different format? How is technology and also the audience's viewing desires, changing the model at NFL Films? Is it, I guess?
I would say we've been grappling this for many, many years, in that we are a quote unquote film studio. So the footage that we capture, you're not going to see for a little while, right? So we have to make those stories of the shows we're producing and the pieces that we're producing appealing to those people that have already know the story. You already know the outcome of that game with, the Bucks versus Eagles. But what is it about that story? We can show you a couple days later, maybe, that, or even months later, that you didn't see on TV. You didn't hear about on Bleacher Report. Where is that? What is that storyline? And most of that comes with the technology that we have actually acquired and developed, which is miking the players.
So you do the mic'd up?
We sure do.
Oh, wow. That's actually outstanding if no one's ever heard that.
Every part of it. We have developed that, to develop the technology with some of, the company that creates these recorders, to be able to put inside the pads so it doesn't bother the player. It doesn't, hurt them in any way, but they can get hit and they can get blocked and they can really take a tumble and it doesn't wreck the machine. Wow. So that sort of technology is definitely something we play into factor. We also use robotics for a lot of our stuff. Now, you'll see robotics on all of those, reality shows, right? We were one of the first reality shows that was true reality with Hard Knocks, in that it was nothing was staged, ever. Nothing, except we might sit an interview down and and ask that person about what they just experienced, but it's very rare. Most of the time, we're just capturing the life of the players. So there are robotic systems with these very cool ceiling tile mics that you can direct to the person, so it's like you're in the room. We're using that technology to adapt. But with the social media world, we are still playing to social media audience as well. Sure. We've got to kind of serve all audiences when we can.
So that's interesting. So that's how it works. So when you see that Hard Knocks and they're in with the coaches, there's no microphone of the coaches in the room. It's actually moving the mic to pick them up. That is interesting technology.
Yes. It's fascinating.
Yes.
The whole thing is fascinating.
Mm-hmm. Wow. So tell us about some of the leaders you've worked for. You don't have to name the names. And how did they inspire you? And obviously, you had to tap on the shoulder here when they were looking for somebody to be an assistant in a job from someone in this program here at Rowan. But tell us about the leaders you've had in your career and what difference did they make for you and what did you learn from them?
Sure. I would say, every leader along the way has absolutely made a mark in my life. And I've taken the things that I think work for me, as each person I feel like has a different managerial style and I react differently to the things that I like, just like any other human. So I would say probably I'll have to, my very first boss, Rick Angeli, the person that was the alumni here. He was one of my favorite bosses, and that he was absolutely kind of like set me up for success. And maybe it was the building block because it was the very first job I got out of college. But his leadership style was a little more laid back. It was more genuine. It was more human-like, if you will. It wasn't robotic. He didn't, take a class. He probably took a class, but it didn't feel like he took a class on how to manage me. And that I appreciate immensely. And that's a little bit like how my boss is today now. He's the president, if you will. He's the senior vice president of NFL Films. He's the same, so I've kind of like started and I don't know if I'm ending my career, but getting closer to that side.
You're in the middle.
With the two bosses that I feel like, it's a more of a hands-off sort of philosophy and hands-off managerial style that I really appreciate and I used, with my staff. Some of the others are, it sort of depends. My mentor in life, in my work life, her name is Susan Stone. She was one who had come in and helped teach us how to do live games, how to run the whole entire live game, the production. So that was new to us. We're film people. Film and TV are two very, very different things. And so she showed us how to do it. And then they needed someone to run the whole entire game production for one of the college bowl games we did back in 2006. And she had me do it. And she said, like, here, this is going to be your job. I was like, I don't know what I'm doing. She's like, oh, yes, you do. Yes, you do. I'm not going to push you off in the deep end of the pool unless I know you can swim. And I'm like, oh, this is fantastic, So I kind of love, that is what I eat up. And I'm like, oh, wow, you gave me that responsibility. You see something in me, you trust me, I'm going to go take it and run. And that's kind of like the things that I like about those sort of managers, for sure.
And I assume that translates into how you lead your own team.
Oh, yeah.
So you're taking these lessons and incorporating them. I mean, every person I feel like that anyone works for, there's maybe good and bad, and you learn lessons from both, and then take them back and try to incorporate the good and avoid the bad stuff that maybe you learned along the way. It's how at least I'm doing it. I don't know about anyone else, but that's definitely how a lot of leaders, I think, that are effective do it. But that also, effective leaders also, definitely encounter challenges throughout the course of their career. Do you want to talk us through some challenges that you faced and how you dealt with them as someone in a leadership role?
Yeah, sure. I think probably the most challenging thing for me and many, many leaders is dealing with conflict, right? Conflict is a tricky thing for me. I almost have to rehearse. I have to kind of rehearse my words and what I'm going to say, because it depends on the person I'm speaking with. If it's someone that I know is going to get emotional, I'm going to bring the box of tissues and we're going to have the hard discussion. But I feel like at the end, no matter what, that person is going to end up in a better place, and so will I. And for each one of those hard, difficult conversations that I may have to have with an employee or even with a colleague, I had to have one with my boss once, the reciprocal sort of feedback back to him that was, not my boss now, a prior boss. He did something that I didn't agree with. So I had to have that difficult conversation. Those things are hard, but I feel like we all grew out of them. It's difficult, but again, the rehearsing for me is what helps me the most.
Yeah, but what's great is the organization, they embrace it.
Yes.
So if you don't have leaders in an organization embrace it, it makes it difficult. So the fact that people are respectful of each other but happy working there means that they're willing to have those conversations. And in not all environments are they willing to have those.
That's true.
And the fact that you had the confidence to speak to your one boss previously down the line, not your exact one somewhere in the past, it gave you the confidence because you knew how the environment was.
Right.
Otherwise, you would have just closed up and probably not done anything.
Absolutely. With that, I also always encourage my employees to please give me feedback.
Right.
And even if they don't feel comfortable giving it to me directly for any reason, tell somebody else. Even if I don't tell my boss, and he'll have a conversation with me, but I would like to have that feedback as well.
Right.
That's probably the trickier thing, is getting people to open up and truly, if I did something that maybe they didn't agree with or they didn't like, I want to hear about it. I may not do anything about it, but I want to hear, what are your thoughts? Where are you, what can I do better to make myself better as well?
And that's the mark of a great
leader.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Being open to hearing that criticism.
Yeah.
So the fact of the matter is you work in a pretty interesting industry. And I'm sure you've seen many famous people coming in and out of the building, or maybe broadcasters, et cetera. How have they been to work with?
In my role, I don't really work with the famous people directly often. I do enough,
Right.
I do enough. But I feel like when you treat them as just a normal human being, they will treat you as the normal human being, right? It's very rare. I'm trying to think of a time when we had an issue that there are, I do remember now. There are some times.
I love that about you.
Yeah, going back to those games, and I was working in broadcast games, and there was some very intimidating talent on camera. Sure. And I feel like there was not a great respect for women in the role that I was working in at that time. So that was a little tricky. So while I try to treat them as human, they treat me less than, and then I just move along my day and I just, do the business I have to do and get out of it, because I can't get aggravated by that sort of, behavior. But most of the time, the celebrities, the players, the coaches, they're all just absolutely wonderful, normal humans.
As the former First Lady Michelle Obama used to say, when they go low, I just go a lot higher.
Exactly.
Right? Because that's what you need to do in your life to make it more successful. You can't let those little things bother you.
Not at all.
So.
And it is a male-dominated industry that you're working
Yes.
in.
Mm-hmm.
Absolutely. And, I run a chamber of commerce which deals with business, and for better or for worse, the general business landscape is still predominantly male-dominated. So, as someone working in a male-dominated field, company, given what you do you see challenges because of that, or like you said, you just kind of brush it off and keep on going? Or is it not that prevalent?
I feel like it was. I feel like it was more prevalent than it is today. I feel like we at the NFL and NFL Films are doing a great effort in trying to change that landscape. We're trying to diversify our landscape, as most companies are. Now that we're more aware of like what it means to be a woman in a role at a media company, and on the side of the line of a football field. Now you're seeing so much more of it. And the more we see it, the more accepting everybody becomes of this and embracing, really, frankly. Right. So it's pretty fantastic. Right now, when I first started at Films, there were no female vice presidents. My former boss, the one who had retired a few years ago, was the first and only for a while. She had retired, and then another woman and I took VP roles at the table. It was just the two of us for quite some time. And then most recently, we had 5. And it's just great. If there's 12 people, there's 5 of us. Finally, we've got a seat at the table. Yeah. And a few of those had just taken the retirement package again recently. So now we have to replace and regenerate. But I feel like we're making headway. We're definitely making headway.
So Taylor Swift-mania took over NFL this year, right? Obviously. And there's a lot more, they say, more female audience watching the game at a younger age because of that. How do you think those things play into what you do at NFL Films? Will the narrative be different? Will the stories be different? What will happen that'll be different?
And feel free to go into depth because I'm a diehard Taylor Swift
fan.
She
is, by the way.
Just came back from seeing her in Europe, so please.
Did you? You went to Paris?
Yes, we'll talk. We'll talk about it after we're done. Tell me everything you have to say about Taylor. Go ahead.
Taylor is so great for our product, right?
So interesting.
You take that force of a person and just by coincidence, she happens to, fall in love with one of our star players. It's been fantastic for us. So we'll play into that just a little bit, but not too much because, we don't want to alienate our avid audience that maybe aren't the biggest Taylor Swift fans, but we will include them all day long if that's what it takes, for sure.
Sure. I know it's been interesting to see people that I know. I am born and raised a diehard Eagles football fan, but so many people around my age that have no interest in football are now watching Kansas City Chiefs games or trying to figure out how to tune in. And so that's got to be great for the NFL and by extension any arm of the NFL. But to see some of the discourse online of folks that just are upset by her presence, I'm like, she's a girl supporting her boyfriend. What are we doing here? So the whole thing is a little bit fascinating, I think, to watch.
That's a whole new generation. I go back to the Franklin Field days. I was a kid. I used to go to the football games with my uncles in Franklin Field. I mean, some people don't even remember. They know it's there because it was penned, but they don't remember the Eagles actually played there.
Yeah.
So let me ask you a question related to Rowan. I don't know if you've already done this, and I don't know if they've asked you to do it. One of the things that alumni bring to the table always is to come back and tell their message about how important it is and what that leadership path should be. What would you tell active students and those in graduate programs of any university of what that path should be for them, what they need to do to be successul?
Really good question.
And I don't want to put you on the spot about coming back to guest lecturing, but I'm sure somebody will ask you after this.
No, I think part of it is really you have to put yourself out there, right? You absolutely have to make your presence known, but be willing to sort of do anything, right? Like do anything in the job that will help you eventually get to your career and come to the table with new ideas. That is what we need. We need innovators. When you talk about technology, like we absolutely could use some forward thinking there for sure. Coming to an interview, if you're able to get an interview, get to that process, with maybe here's some suggestions, some ideas of things that, NFL Films could do to make your product more exposed, more valuable to your client base. That's absolutely something I'd suggest for sure.
It's interesting. What about the world of AI? Will that have an impact of what you do from a production standpoint?
AI is scary. So the NFL shut down the AI, and we are absolutely not allowed to even to use it or entertain it by any means. When that first started coming out, 2 years ago, maybe? When it started becoming really prevalent.
Right.
Right before that, however, we did do a deep fake with the permissions of all the families with Pete Rozelle and Al Davis on a 30 for 30 film. We absolutely got all the permissions possible to do so, but it was a very tricky thing. That was, before it was like, popular. So AI is intimidating. It's absolutely scary. I think there's going to be a place for it in the workforce. I think there's going to be a place where we can use it to our benefit for maybe doing some of the things that, quicker, right? That we can't do, so that it frees us up to do the other things that we need to, to accomplish. But I don't know. Me personally, it intimidates me a great deal.
And I think you're right. And no matter what you do, AI is going to be a piece of the future. But, it's moving so fast. Government regulation hasn't caught up, which is the scary part, because now it just seems like there's no rules, abuse of AI being used. And that is terrifying for any industry, for any company, for any human being, right? But I think that any natural progression looking ahead is going to incorporate AI, and that's not necessarily a bad thing. We just need to get caught up a little bit to the time.
Exactly.
So I think there's a lot to think about with AI, because it can be a little overwhelming.
Sure.
But so what was your favorite personal 30 for 30 episode that you guys created?
Oh, I would have to say the one we most recently did was Reggie White.
Right.
Oh.
I don't know if you've seen it yet or not. If you haven't, I will. Yeah, it is. I highly recommend it.
Yeah, I've seen that.
It is. It touches all the touch points of controversy and what, he went through in his life, and what the Black community went through in their lives. And it was just, it's an amazing film. I love that film.
Yeah, he was a Washington Township guy. When he came to the Eagles, he lived right across from Washington Township High School. And he was very down to earth, and people loved him. And people loved him in Philly, and then people loved him in Green Bay, and he died far too young.
Yes.
Unfortunately.
And one of our podcast guests was his backup.
Yes, exactly. Who? That's right.
My husband, Mike Renna, played for the Eagles and was Reggie White's backup.
That's right.
And adored him.
Really?
He never hit the field because Reggie is the best to ever play the position in the history of the sport. But absolutely loved being a part of that D-line and working with Reggie.
Yeah, Mike is now the president and CEO of the South Jersey Industries, but I always forget that because he's so humble that he rarely wants to talk about that.
He does not like to talk about it. He's very shy about it.
What's your favorite book of all time?
My favorite book of all time? It's probably Beyond the Beautiful Forevers. Not a business book at all.
Tell us about that.
It is a book about this woman had traveled to India. I think her husband was on a business trip, but she traveled with him. And she was talking about the plight of the Indian families that are homeless, right? That are there just sort of in horrible conditions growing up in that area. And it's just so touching. It's so sad. I cried,
Wow.
That. And you know what? Probably my favorite business book is actually Jonathan Livingston Seagull as one of my favorite
great.
Business books. And it's something that I've carried with one of another mentor in my life who had recently retired about a year ago. At NFL Films, he and I connected on that book. So you can kind of just see the plight of this bird, right? Reaching, and he's going to go. It doesn't matter who puts him in a box.
Yeah.
He's going to get out and he's going to fly above that box,
Right.
and that's what I want to be, and I want to inspire people to do.
Sounds like you've done that.
Yeah. So outside of reading, what do you like to do in your spare time when you're not working?
I love to work out. I love to spend time with my kids. They're teenagers now. They're going to be 15 very soon, but I do. I love to work out. I love to, garden, work on the yard, do that sort of thing. I just love to be outdoors.
Your children are female, male? What are they?
One of each. Twins.
So you're letting any one of them play football?
Well, good question. I would love for them to play flag football.
Is there other sports you like besides football?
Who, me?
You? Yeah.
Oh, I love basketball.
Okay.
Sixers. I'm a big Sixers fan. I'm actually a Steelers fan, not a Eagles fan. Sorry.
Why a Steelers fan? Why a Steelers fan?
My mother's family actually came from there, and because I grew up here in southern New Jersey, I kind of at that time it's when the fans were throwing snowballs at Santa Claus, and I wasn't identifying with them.
Yep.
So I didn't choose the Eagles, so we went with the next best thing. So it's the Steelers. But now today, I would say that the Eagles are by far my favorite NFC team for sure.
Yeah.
And then the Steelers are my fan. I love basketball. Baseball I watch in person.
Well, we have a great season with the Phillies this year, so it's a season that people should
fantastic.
keep watching, right?
Yes.
Because it's always about the entertainment value of it, right?
Absolutely.
Basketball is great. It's funny you talk about the transition of males than female leaders. And my friend is Mark Zumoff, who was the Sixers announcer for years. And when he retired, I often thought, who's going to replace him? Well, she's outstanding.
She's outstanding.
Okay? So, and you hear some of these voices, it's just a whole different perspective of how you listen to the game. Yeah. It really is. And Mark was great at what he did. And he even said when they hired her, he said, she's going to be great. And people would say, we're not really sure. She's an outstanding announcer as well.
Yeah.
So
yeah. No, she's great.
You are great. And it's great to have you here because obviously Rowan should be proud of you as a graduate,
Absolutely.
which I know you are proud of the university as well. And thank you for doing what you do in your career, but also for thinking about how those people from Rowan need the message. And that's what part of this today is, not just for the Rowan people, but the overall leadership community. Sure. But I know somebody after this podcast will reach out to you and say, Kelly, can you come back and do a guest appearance somewhere in a lecture? Because I do guest lecturing here. And it is fulfilling to give people that opportunity to hear from leaders who've been through their careers. And the challenges is, no leadership role is linear, right? Everything is a unique path. And your career has been a unique path because how you moved along in your career at NFL Films is remarkable.
Thank you. Thank you both for having me. It's been such a pleasure.
All right. Thank you, Kelly. We appreciate it.
I hope you enjoyed that conversation as much as I did. What was your key takeaway from this discussion? Share it on our social media channels at Simply Dynamic Podcast. Next up, in our Fresh Perspective segment, established leaders and early career professionals will share insights and ideas on best practices for networking and professional relationship building.
So before I even go to a networking event, I want to do some research of the event and who might be there. I might check the guest list. I might go on Facebook and see if I see some faces or if I recognize some names. I'm also going to make sure my calendar's free and clear. I'm not going to have any conflicts. Another big thing is dressing. I think dressing is probably one of the most, it's understated and overstated, and it can go different ways. Another one is dressing unique. After that, I would also make sure that you know what you're selling or your own product or service that you have, either in your company or something that you started. You want to be confident of what you're going to talk about. When you get to the event, the biggest thing is be yourself. The best person to talk to is someone that is going to be genuine and natural, and that's no better than yourself. I've done that before. I've approached these networking events, and I think they're great.
In attending networking events, here are some tips for making connections with other participants. Remember, make it light. Don't add pressure to the conversation that this encounter has to necessarily feed your career goals. Get to know a few people and give them a chance to get to know you by offering nuggets about yourself. Some helpful tips I find might be approach with confidence, introduce yourself confidently, smile, offer a firm handshake, and maintain eye contact. Show genuine interest in the other person. Think about asking open-ended questions. You can often engage others in conversation by asking questions that encourage them to share more about themselves. Have a couple of open-ended questions in your back pocket. Remember to listen actively. Pay close attention to what others say and show interest in their responses. This will help you build rapport and build a meaningful connection. Also, find common ground. Look for common interests, experiences, or goals that you share with other participants. You can build on this as well. Building on common ground can help you establish a stronger connection. Offer value. Be prepared to offer help or resources to others without expecting any kind of immediate returns. Remember, networking is about building relationships and mutually beneficial connections.
There's a lot that goes into a networking event, both before, during, and after you've had the interaction. Some things I like to do ahead of time are, number one, make sure that I have my business cards with me so I have an ability to share my information with someone who may be more interested in connecting after. Secondly, I like to take a look at the attendee list, if there is one, just so I can get a sense of who I'm going to be in the room with and what connections might be meaningful for people. You see, because when we're networking, it's really not about what we can take for ourselves. It's the value that we bring to others in the room that is critical. The other thing to keep in mind is it's not just about the work that we do during the event. After we attend an event, it's critical that we follow up with those individuals, either linking in with them, reaching out to them if you've received that business card, maybe scheduling a lunch or drinks if it's appropriate, and continuing to deepen that connection over time and find other ways that you can help that person in what they're looking to accomplish. A network is about what we do for each other, not just what we do for ourselves. Angelo Pinti, Senior Financial Advisor with Merrill Lynch in Philadelphia, first graduate of the Entrepreneurship Program at Rowan University, and member of the Rowan College of Business Alumni Advisory Council.
Denise Dennery, Program Assistant, Office of Career Advancement, Advisory Board Chair, Women's Alliance Network at Rowan University.
Brian Ekus, Real Estate Broker of Young Realty, Co-Chair of the Alumni Advisory Council for the Rowan College of Business, Adjunct Professor of Real Estate and Entrepreneurship for the School of Innovation and Entrepreneurship, Rowan MBA Alumni 2015.
In each episode of the Simply Dynamic podcast, we'd like to close out with an action-oriented tip from an expert that you can implement in your workplace. Today's expert tip comes from Marianne Bays, a cannabis industry business consultant, entrepreneur, analyst, advocate, and a founding board member and the current vice president of the New Jersey Cannabusiness Association.
Today we're going to talk about career transitions and career planning. I've changed jobs a lot. It's led me to very interesting places. So my first thought here is that one of the problems with planning a career is it isn't a singular thing. You don't sit down and plan your career. I've always been amazed at people who thought they knew what they wanted to do when they were children. Everything that I'm doing today didn't exist when I was a child. You have to look ahead, and you have to continually look ahead. You also have to understand that you are the steward of your career. No one else can do it better than you can. It's not an exercise that you do annually just with your supervisor. It's something you need to be thinking about all the time. And you don't owe your employer anything. When you're thinking about career transitions, we think about, well, how am I going to resign? And, what's that going to do to this organization? This really aren't issues that are big there. When you are employed, your only responsibility to your employer is to do a good job. When you're ready to leave, you want to leave things in good order, but you want to move on and not be guilted into staying in a situation that is not rewarded for you. How do you move from one position into the next level of your career when it's not a direct promotion? When what you've done before may not look to people as if it prepared you for the role, but you know it did. What you need to do is look at what your most valued skills are. What is it that people say about you that, makes you know that you have contributed positively to the organization? What are the things that you can confidently take into any career that you go into? We have characteristics that are not just developed for one job. You don't leave them behind, you take them to the next. You have to think about what kind of tasks you've liked doing and what you've not liked doing. You don't want to put yourself in a situation where, again, you don't like the work. You want to put yourself in a situation where you can grow. While you're thinking about this, you should be thinking about your resume too. How are you going to present your skills? We typically do a standard resume in order, showing the jobs that we've had through our career, starting with the most recent one. That's not necessarily going to be the right way to approach a transition. I've worked with people to identify organizational skills and competencies that can be carried from one place to another. And it takes generalizing the skill that you have, taking it out of the context of the jobs you've been in and just putting it out there as a general capability that you'll bring to the job. The other thing that I think is very important in career development and career transitions is being connected to your business community, participating in industry associations, and frankly, giving away your talents for free there so that people know about your skills, so that people are interested in you, and when you're ready to make a move, you can reach out to them comfortably. Consulting can be an excellent way to transition out of a job into something that you find better. If you're a person who values independence, new challenges frequently, consulting might meet your needs. That might be something that can carry you to the end of your career because it's constantly changing. You're ready for consulting when you recognize that you've got skills that other organizations don't have and desire. That's perfect foundation for going out and saying, I can take this skill out to multiple companies and I can earn a living doing it. But you also have to think about how you're going to be challenged and how you're going to learn. Consulting can become a dead end too, if you're not surrounded by people who are teaching you new things and allowing you to grow into new areas. Marianne Bays, Vice President, New Jersey Cannabusiness Association, CEO, Northeast Corridor Provisions, and Inaugural Member, Rowan MBA Advisory Council.
Thank you to all of our guests for joining us today, and thank you, our audience, for listening to the Simply Dynamic podcast. This podcast is a collaborative project led by the Graduate Studies team at Rowan University's Rohr College of Business in partnership with our hosts, Joe Devine and Christina Renna, and with support from producer and creative director Keith Brand, a professor in Rowan's radio, television, and film department. Music from this episode came from Epidemic Sound and Renku Corporation, recorded in collaboration with nonprofit partners. To learn more about the Simply Dynamic podcast, visit simplydynamicpodcast.com. Until the next episode, take care, and we look forward to connecting with you again soon.